Fear Not, Episode 9. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello and welcome, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Kathleen Gerus-Darbison. Kathleen is a wife, mother, survivor, activist, sociology professor, tree hugger, and new oil painter. She's involved in volunteering for the hemophilia and AIDS communities, both locally and nationally, serving for 5 years on President Clinton's HIV/AIDS Advisory Council, as well as serving as a board member for both the National Association for People with AIDS and the National Hemophilia Foundation. In 1999, she co-founded the Stitches Doll Project, a nonprofit consisting of traveling educational exhibitions and empowerment workshops for women within the hemophilia communities of the U.S., India, the Philippines, and Iran. In 1992, Kathleen co-authored a book with her daughter called My Parents Have HIV/AIDS, Some Advice from an 8-Year-Old. She is currently working on 2 other books. One is largely an autobiographical work, the other a children's book called ABCs of Social Justice, a primer for kids and their grown-ups. Well, welcome today, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. Maybe you could take a few minutes just to fill in the gaps and give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm born in Detroit, Michigan. I'm one of 6 kids. I grew up in a wonderful, loving household and had some health issues from when I was very young. I had really, really bad asthma, and then I also found out when I was 2, when I almost died, that I have a fatal allergy to nuts. So, from a very young age, I had this sense of mortality, what it meant uh, not be sure that you were going to be around, the next day. And I think at a very young age, that was unusual for me. And as it turns out, of course, I think it was just preparing me for the news that I would get, later on in my life. Because when I was 26, 27, my husband and I found out through a national study that was done on the safety of transfusions, blood transfusions, that both he and I were infected with HIV. And that moment was obviously a very huge, changing, life-altering moment, as you can imagine. And
Yes, very much
yeah,
so.
so my life changed from what I thought it would be about, and I'm not sure now. I don't remember back then what I thought my life was going to be about, but I certainly didn't think it would be about, um, you know, a lot of grief, and dealing with grief and dealing with other people's grief, my own mortality, the concern for my and welfare for my daughter, and obviously my family members, and then largely, obviously, I got involved on local and national levels because I'm very concerned about the health and welfare of all people, not just in this country, but all over the world. So I got very involved with HIV education because of that.
Yeah. Having worked with you a couple of times, I mean, you really impressed me, and I find you so fascinating, and it's just really amazing what you do. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah. So, are you ready to face your fears and fear not today?
Well, it's as good a day as any.
Okay. So, why don't you share with us one of your biggest fears that you've had to face, and tell us a little bit about what you did to overcome it?
Wow. Um, I think initially, if you would have asked me that, 20 years ago, I suppose, I would have said the biggest fear was my own mortality. But that's not true anymore. I think my biggest fear was when I almost lost my daughter, um, because of everything that she was dealing with in her life. She developed an eating disorder, and when she was like 13, 14, 15, right around there, and we almost lost her to anorexia. And so for me, um, that shook me to the core. That was the
Okay.
biggest fear that I have ever dealt with in my life. And I had to educate myself, about it, and find out as much as I could so that I could help her in every way that I could. Um, and as you know, and as everybody knows, we can only control so much in our lives, and we really can only control how we react to a situation. And what I have always done whenever I've been faced with something like this is to delve into it and find out as much as possible. So that is what I did. And luckily for me, I had just remarried um, shortly before that time because my first husband died of AIDS related problems. And my new husband, Bill, was an extremely supportive person. And he and I did everything we could to help my daughter. And uh, so for me, I think, education becomes, it has always been, but it really became for me the way to deal with some of the biggest fears that I've ever had in my life. Because the more I know about something, the less scary it is, you know? I
Yeah,
mean, even if it's bad news, do you know what I mean? Even if you find out stuff that you don't really want to know, at least you know, at least you have that information, and then you can proceed forward. So it's not just a big dark path that you're walking down. At least there's some idea of what you're going to meet on the path way down there, you know?
I totally agree. I think education, you have to, exactly, education is the key. It's just to figure out what it is, and then you know what you're dealing with, and
Mm-hmm.
then you still have to deal with it. But
Right, right.
yeah, you equip yourself.
Exactly.
It's,
Exactly.
yeah. So, do you have any personal habits, or maybe you could share with just, a singular habit that you do, whether it be on a daily basis or something that helps keep you staying out of fear and staying confident and just proceeding with life?
Um, I wish I could tell you something really awesome. Like, wow, she really does that. Like she meditates every day. I would like to do a lot of a lot of things that help me stay out of the fear. But to be honest with you, I don't live in a fear-based mindset at all. I did that for many years. As you can imagine, early on, there was no hope in regards to HIV. And I was in the very first wave, many of the people, in fact, most of the people that I knew, I should say, that were infected when I was, so those people are gone. Um, so I did operate out of fear for many, many years. And, but I learned somewhere along the way, of course, that fear doesn't help us. Okay, it stresses our bodies out. It obviously stresses the immune system, and so fear didn't work for me. And so instead, what I've tried to do is get involved with stuff, in my life that is fulfilling, that helps other people because then it helps me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like I'm using my life and the years that I've had that I didn't think I would have on this earth to make the world a better place, and even in just my small corner, through the work that I do. And you mentioned in the intro, I am a sociology professor, and in that role, I get to talk about all kinds of issues with young people, although many of my students obviously are also, of varying ages now. I do get a big wide variety of folks in my classes, but I really find that working with people, young people especially, I feel a lot of hope. There's been a shift overall, and it's a positive one. It's
Yeah.
people that want to see the world be a better place and not cling to some of the old, scary, you know what I mean, scary thoughts. And they're looking to they see the world as the global place that it is, which is a relatively new phenomenon, this whole globalization thing, and that you can talk to somebody just like I am with you. You can talk on Skype to somebody all the way across the world and become friends with them. And so the new technologies have really broken down a lot of the old walls that we had, and people are realizing that we're all in this thing together. So that really does, I would say my teaching on a daily basis really, really helps me. And then I did discover oil painting last September. And that is something that is strictly for me, that calms me, brings me peace. I can get into the zone and I forget about all these other things that drive me crazy, the stuff that I don't have any
Yeah.
control
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing when you just focus on the moment or you focus on what you should be doing, how amazing that fear just sort of evaporates.
Yeah, it really
Yeah,
does.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't always lived out of fear myself, and that was one of the things when I did sort of cross over, and it is a crossover, is that if you just you take it and you face it, it just really does just it dissipates. It
Yes,
dissipates.
yes, it absolutely does. And I also think that the more, like, I have some very good connections with other people who have dealt with either similar situations or, you know, similar fears. And when you talk with other people and you can share those fears, that also it allows you to let them go. You know what I mean? Because you're not holding them up, and it's not a secret anymore. Because early on with the HIV epidemic, it was secret. It was a horrible, scary secret, and nobody talked about it at all. So to carry that around yourself, it's terrifying. You know, the moment I got to share that with other people and realize that there were others who were dealing with the same thing,
Hmm.
that really did get rid of a lot of that fear.
I think you touched on something there too. I mean, fear in general, but uh, it's that thing where it's like you think you're the only one who's living in fear, so
Yes,
there's shame,
yes,
but everybody has fear come against them, and I think that's liberating too.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and sharing most definitely. Well, uh, is there a possible resource that you might give to our listeners that might help them? Something that you've come across on your journey that, a book or something that might help those cross over
Hmm.
themselves?
I wouldn't, not a book necessarily, but like I said, I think in general, the resource for me was to reach out as opposed to go into myself, to reach out to other people. So, as an example, early on, obviously in this epidemic, there was, with HIV, I should say, um, there was no discussion about women in that in that realm. It was all focused on other groups of people. Okay, so not women. And I started a support group here in the Detroit area for women who were dealing with not necessarily people that were infected, women that were infected with HIV, but were dealing with HIV in their lives, with a family member or whatever. And so reaching out to others and having that support system really can help, no matter what you're dealing with. I mean, this is, the obviously the big example that everybody knows about, of course, is like AA, a 12-step program that it gives people back some of the power that they lost perhaps, and
Hmm.
and then allows you to lean on other people when you need to. You know what I'm saying? So I would say,
Yeah.
as far as a resource, just there are all kinds of stuff happening, in everywhere. If you live in a city, of course, there's tons of things. If you're in a rural area, it may be a little bit harder to find those kinds of resources. But for me, that was a lifesaver. And in fact, my best friend, my best female friend, was a woman who was going through virtually the same thing I was. And I cannot imagine my life without her. You know, she understood everything that I was going through. I understood everything she was going through. It didn't change our situation any, didn't make it like better, right? Didn't change that. But just knowing that we could go through it, holding our hands together and crying together if that's what we needed, that was just more than I can tell you. It was very helpful and very healing for me.
That's fascinating. That seems to be sort of a recurring theme as I'm interviewing people for this podcast, that who your inner circle is so
Yes,
important, so
yes.
important. And we really need to be very selective about that because if you have the wrong people, you're not going to get
You
what you
you
need.
you
So,
couldn't have said that better. That's so
yeah.
true. It can make or break you.
Yeah. So, are you ready for the speed round?
Sure.
Great. So, what individual, fictional or real, has made the most impact on your life?
I love this question. Um, Once again, I'm gonna probably sound kind of like a dork, but I have to say it's my daughter. It's my
Okay.
daughter Stephanie. As a mom, as a parent, I always thought that my job when you have a kid is to raise them and teach them everything that they need to know, right? That's my job.
Yeah.
I realized somewhere along the way, and I don't know exactly when, but it started when she was young, that I learned as much, if not more, from her, okay, than from anybody else that has ever walked in my life. And many people, of course, have crossed my path, and I've learned stuff from all of them. My grandfather was a wonderful role model for me. My mother is a fabulous person. My dad was a generous, ideal person. My personal life, the people in my life have been wonderful, fabulous people. I don't have to look too far, to see, to look for individuals that have impacted me. Um, and I really do. I really think that my daughter Stephanie, has had the single most influence on my life. I've told her this. I'm sure she doesn't realize just how much, but yeah, without a doubt, I would have to say it's Stephanie.
Yeah. Having met her really briefly, she is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Kathleen, do you have a favorite sound?
Yeah, it's the waves, the water.
Nice. I agree with you
So
on that one.
soothing, if you can sit and you can hear the water, whether it's crashing waves or even just in your own backyard, like a fountain or something like that. Just that running water is extremely soothing to me.
I agree. I agree. What's your biggest weakness?
I think I talk too much. um, Obviously, my work as an instructor, as a professor, requires me to talk a lot. Um, but I think that may be my biggest weakness because sometimes I talk too much and I don't listen enough.
What's your biggest strength?
Um, wow, my biggest strength. Hmm. I think people who know me have told me this, so I'll just repeat what they said. um, I think it's my compassion for other people. Um, I I would I don't have a problem doing anything, helping anybody for whatever reason. And if I had a cajillion dollars, you know what I mean? I'm one like if I was Bill Gates as an example,
Hmm.
Bill or Melinda, I would be doing what they're doing. I think that there's a lot of problems in the world, and they seem sometimes that they're overwhelming and that they can't be helped, but they can be. They can be tackled a little bit at a time, And I think if we focus our energies in these positive areas, that it can make a huge impact for the whole for the whole world.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, do you have any parting advice for the listeners today?
Hmm. Parting advice. I think I would say listen to your inner voice.
Okay.
We often, get a feeling about something and then we think, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to that. I think if your inner voice tells you something like run away from this person, you run away from that person. I think if your inner voice says, um, give this a try, sometimes just go out on a limb because you have to take chances sometimes to try something new, then try something new. So we often discount that our little conscience or our inner voice, and I think we should listen to it a little bit more.
That's excellent advice. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining us today and sharing all of your experiences. I really, truly appreciate it, as always.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.